Andrew. How are we doing? That's fine. We'll just all sit and watch you, okay? I'm just glad we got kids around. Yep. Well, I'll talk about you later, okay? As we close out Lamentations, I want to talk a little bit about basketball this morning. I know that's kind of weird. And, it's kind of a hockey season, but basketball's out there. I really didn't get involved in basketball until my son started playing, actually. So I learned a lot more about basketball after Craig started to play basketball than I ever knew before. Kids get to educate you, too. So basically, I want to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers this morning. They are sometimes a basketball team. Other times, maybe not. They've got a long history. The 76ers have a long history, but way back when, Wilt Chamberlain actually played for them and led them to their first championship. Their first basketball championship was after they had made a deal to acquire Wilt, and so he led them to that championship. And then they went through a bit of a drought again until, and I remember these, this is the days that I remember because I'm old, but Julius Erving, I'm still trying to figure out why he's posing with the trophy in a washroom, but that picture interested me. So Dr. J, I remember the great battles with Dr. J, and at the time I was more of a Celtic fan, so it was interesting. But he led them to their second championship, and he posed for the picture in the bathroom with the trophy. Next was a guy named Moses Malone, and he had a long tour of a bunch of teams. But while he was playing with Philadelphia, they got their third championship. And then a guy you might recognize because now he's on CNN, but Charles Barkley played for them. They didn't get a championship during the days of Charles, though, so he didn't get to. They've gotten 3 NBA championships. And then in the 2010s, they were kind of a middle-of-the-road team. And you have to understand, basketball kind of has these bunch of teams that are in the middle, then they have a few elite teams, and then those who are on the bottom. And so, the beginning of the 2010s, they were kind of middle of the road. And so they decided they were going to hire a guy named Sam Hinkie to be their general manager. And Sam decided that he was going to blow up the team. He said the way to get to another championship is to get a whole bunch of draft picks and young prospects, and we will make the move from there. And so that's what he did. In the 2012-13 season, basketball plays 82 games. And in that season, Philadelphia won 34. So they weren't quite 500. Sam Hinkie took over, and the very next year, the Philadelphia 76ers won 19 games. The next year after that, they won 18 games. And the following year after that, they won 10 games and lost 72. Some of you guys thought the Oilers were bad. But all the time, there was this idea that there was a process. There was something that was going to change. I love this guy. Here's faith for you. Right now, we're stinky, but I trust Hinkie. Go Sixers. There's a fan, probably during their 10-win season. But the idea that they put on all their ads and stuff was trust the process. Trust the process. Know that there is a plan to get us better, to win that 4th championship. It's a plan that started in 2012, 2013. And if winning a championship is the goal of trust the process, they haven't gotten there yet. They haven't won that next process or that next championship. And so they are still trusting the process. And as a humble watcher of basketball, I think their best chance to win a championship was actually a couple of years ago. They're kind of a middle-of-the-road team once again right now. Few games over 500. But they've convinced their fans that they can trust the process. We're in the middle of Lamentations, which is a horribly depressing book at times. But the clear message throughout Lamentations is the same one that Philadelphia is trying to sell to their fans. There's a plan, but you've got to trust the process. You've got to trust that God is going to do something. And that was hard for Jeremiah, who was sitting there looking at a city that had been totally destroyed. And he could not see how God would bring anything good out of this. So we're going to finish this morning with the fifth chapter of Lamentations, the last chapter of Lamentations, the last poem that Jeremiah wrote. And it starts off with these words: "Remember, Lord, what has happened to us. Look and see our disgrace." If you're trying to take blanks, it's our cry in distress. We, when we are in distress, often see things emotionally. We don't see things the way they are. We see things the way that our emotions perceive them to be. And our emotions are not always accurate. Sometimes our emotions lie to us. So, in the States down south, they're having a battle over their border, southern border. Northern border doesn't seem to bother them a whole lot. Southern border seems to be what's on their mind. And so recently, and this gets really confusing, but Texas passed a rule or a law that said that they could take over the border in Texas and do with whatever they wanted to with the people coming in. And the idea is that the federal government isn't doing enough. So therefore, we're going to do it. The problem is that nobody really knows what this looks like, and that the federal government wasn't doing enough because they didn't have the resources, and Texas doesn't have the resources either. Texas is trying to embarrass the federal government, and they're saying, "You're not listening to us. You're not hearing what we're trying to tell you, so we're going to take this over." And it's not that the government isn't hearing them. It's that there are some impediments that need to be removed before they can do what they need to do, or at least they feel that they do. And so this law is supposed to correct that, and the law was reinstated by the Supreme Court, and then an appeals court put it back on hold again, so we still don't know what they're doing. But the message, and it's an emotional message that is on a lot of our hearts. It says this: I've got a problem. You're not fixing my problem. Therefore, you don't hear me. You're not listening to me. And often that's not true. I'm a veteran of the worship wars. I was in a church that we eventually actually did two services, a contemporary and traditional. But back when we were all in one service, I can remember I would be up on the worship team. I wasn't the pastor. I was just the associate at the time. So I got to be up on the worship team and then go down while the pastor preached and then come back up for the worship team. And I could walk out of the sanctuary. And I'd walk out one side of the sanctuary and I'd have this wonderful older lady come up to me and she'd say, "Garry, you have to understand, there's a lot of older people in the congregation. We need more traditional elements." And I'd say, "Okay." And then I'd turn around and walk a little bit further, and I'd get some young person up to me. "Garry, you have to listen to me. You have to understand, there's a lot of younger people in the congregation, and we need some more contemporary elements." And I'm going, "Yeah, okay, yeah, that works." I got to the point where I figured if I got the same amount of complaints from both sides, I was doing a good job. I was somewhere in the middle. But their message was still like, if you don't fix this, then you're not listening to me. You don't hear me. And I was hearing them. I just didn't quite have a ready solution that would fix both sides. Eventually, like I said, we went to 2 services, and even that wasn't a good solution because they wanted to be together, which I got. I understood it, but I didn't know how to fix it. One of my favorite complaints from that era was from a lady. She phoned me up on Monday morning, and she was going to complain about how loud the band was. And I get it. Our band can be loud. I often tell people, if we're getting loud, it's because we're having fun. So maybe the solution to this is that we shouldn't let the worship team have fun. But, there was this idea that, yes, when we start to really feel the music and feel God moving and we're getting excited, we tend to get a little louder. So we're working on that. We try. But this lady phoned me on Monday morning, and her complaint was that the band was too loud. And I said, okay. And I didn't recognize the voice. I didn't know who she was. So I finally asked her, sorry, who is this? And she told me her name, and I didn't recognize the name. And I'm going, okay. What service did you come to? And she said, well, I don't come to your church. Okay. Yeah, I'm listening to you. I said, do you live in the area? And she said, no, I live in Fort Saskatchewan. And I said, okay. Have you ever been to our church? No, I've never been to your church. Do you go to church? She says, yes, I got a nice little church in Fort Saskatchewan that we really like. And I'm going, well, that sounds great. Why are you phoning me? I know our band can be loud, but I don't think we're so loud that you can hear us from Fort Saskatchewan. What's up? And then she made this comment. She said, if there's going to be that kind of music in heaven, I don't want to go. And I was, again, a little confused by this. I'm going, okay, I'm not sure that I'm going to heaven for the music, but I'm sure there's going to be some great music there. I hope Chris Tomlin brings his guitar. But I don't understand what you're trying to tell me. You don't come to my church. You've never been to my church. But you're criticizing what the church is doing. Why? And her message was, you're not listening to me. I'm listening. I just don't understand what it is you're trying to get at. Look at these intro words. Let's back up here. Remember, Lord, what has happened to us. Jeremiah thought that God forgot. Think God just didn't remember what had happened? Or Jeremiah felt like God had forgotten. And then look and see our disgrace. What, you think God hasn't seen the disgrace of Israel? But I get it, because we feel that way sometimes. God, remember me. When the truth is that God has never forgotten us. God, look and see the trouble that I'm going through. When the truth is that God is probably crying more tears than we are. Back in Jeremiah's day, I would hazard that God had cried over Israel more than even the weeping prophet Jeremiah had. But it's the way we feel emotionally in our cry of distress. God, you are not seeing me. And in faith, we need to recognize that, yes, God sees us. He understands everything that we are going through. There is a cry of distress that is emotional, but it's not what God intends. It's not what is real. It's just the way that we feel in our times of distress. And we need something from God. Let me continue. I'm going to read the middle verses of Lamentations 5. Our inheritance has been turned over to strangers, our homes to foreigners. We have become fatherless, our mothers are widows. We must buy the water we drink. Our wood can be had only at a price. Those who pursue us are at our heels. We are weary and find no rest. We submitted to Egypt and Assyria to get enough bread. Our ancestors sinned and are no more, but we bear their punishment. Slaves rule over us, and there is no one to free us from their hands. We get our bread at the risk of our lives because of the sword in the desert. Our skin is hot as an oven, feverish from hunger. Women have been violated in Zion, and virgins in the towns of Judah. Princes have been hung by their hands. Elders show no respect. Young men toil at the millstones, and boys stagger under loads of wood. The elders are gone from the city gate. The young men have stopped their music. Joy is gone from our hearts. Our dancing has turned to mourning. The crown has fallen from our head. Woe to us, for we have sinned. Because of this, our hearts are faint. Because of these things, our eyes grow dim. For Mount Zion, which lies desolate with jackals prowling over it. Again, that next is a story of desolation. There is no doubt, and we see this in every one of the Lamentations, the middle verses describe a story of destruction and desolation. Jeremiah is looking at what was once a beautiful city, and it is no more. What once was a strong city with city walls has been leveled. There's no turning back from the desolation that has overcome Jerusalem. And so Jeremiah weeps for the city. There is a town, and I'm going to really destroy the name of it. Kayakoi, I think would be approximate, but I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that. But Kayakoi was a city that was, I don't know when it was established, by the 600s, it was a bishopric of the kingdom, the Christian world. It resides just down in the southwest corner of Turkey. It is a close to coastal town. And most of the scholars who look at this city or this town recognize it as probably a haven for people who were disturbed by pirates, and they had run to this town to try to be safe. So the town began to get to build up a little bit. It was a Christian town. So these were Christians that were gathering in the town. And it continued to grow in southwestern Turkey. The next kind of wave of shock that came for the town, what came in 1054, I think, July 16th, when there was the Great Schism. There was a united church at one point, and in the 11th century, there was a split in this church into an east and west. Rome became the dominant force in the Western church, and then the Eastern church had its own ruling authority and its own pope. And there was two churches in Kayakoi, and the split happened, and they went with the Eastern churches. So they became members of the Greek Orthodox Church. So now we have two Greek Orthodox churches in this little town of Christians existing on the southeast corner of Turkey. In 1299 was the next wave, because that was the Ottoman Empire taking over. And the Ottoman Empire was basically Islamic power, and it took over the area, including Kayakoi. So this was now a Christian town inside of Muslim territory. And yet the town flourished and prospered and existed in peace with their Muslim rulers. And again, time continued to go on. And everything seemed fine until we reached the 18th century. At that point, the Ottoman Empire began to break down, and they also began to modernize. So instead of having religious law, they replaced it with sacred law. Secular law. They replaced what we would call the Sharia law with secular law. They started to build things according to education. They built factories. They modernized themselves during this period. And at this point, there starts to be a little bit of friction between the Christians living in Kayakoi and the Muslim overlords. And part of the problem was that as the Ottoman Empire began to modernize, they began to value education, and the Christians were better educated. And so they viewed them as getting certain privileges that nobody else could get because of their education. And this tension began to grow throughout the 19th century, and then finally into the early years of the 20th century. In World War I, the Ottoman Empire fought alongside Germany and Austria-Hungary and the Central Powers. In 1915, the Ottoman Empire had decided that they had had enough, and they wanted to get rid of Greeks and Christians from their land. And Kayakoi was both Greek and Christian. So in 1915, the town was destroyed. If you go there, you still find houses, or at least the shells of them. Roofs are gone. Still a few walls standing where these houses were. But the town was wiped out in 1915. And the Muslims refused to rebuild it because they said there was ghosts that inhabited the town. And so it remains a story of desolation. Desolation happens. And often we don't understand it. God, why would you allow this to happen? Ever prayed that prayer? God, I don't get it. Why would you allow this to happen? Why would you allow my devout Christian friend to get cancer? Why would you allow a Christian pastor to lose his family? God, why would you do that? It's the question of desolation, and it often doesn't have an answer, at least not one that's suitable to us. And so we were left with a lament like Jeremiah had. We are left wondering, God, what in the world are you trying to do? Do I still have a place in your kingdom? Is there anything left for me? And sometimes that question not only is hard, but it seems to have no answer. And it brings us up against some of our biggest fears. And we wonder, what in the world, God? What is next? And I've been there. I understand what that's like. And Jeremiah is there as he writes his laments. Let me just finish off Lamentations 5. You, Lord, reign forever. Your throne endures from generation to generation. Why do you always forget us? Why do you forsake us so long? Restore us to yourself, Lord, that we may return. Renew our days as of old, unless you have utterly rejected us and are angry with us beyond measure. And that last blank is what it means to be a Canadian. I know it's a little bit of a strange, out of the blue response to the lament, but there's a reason behind it. Lamentations 5 does not end with a great statement of faith that says God is going to come through and rescue us. It ends with a question. God, we know that you are forever, but do you still have something for us? Is there anything there for us? Unless you have utterly rejected us and are angry with us beyond measure. Those are the last words of Jeremiah 5. God, I'm not getting this. The desolation has gotten to me. I am crying. There are tears, and I don't know what's going on, but none of this is under my control. I can't control what is going on outside. All I can do is ask a question. And it is with this comment that Lamentations ends with Jeremiah's words, Jeremiah's questions, Jeremiah's almost lack of hope. So what does that have to do with being a Canadian? Well, I don't know whether you know this or not. Canadians are not Americans. Did you know that? Canadians are different from the United States. Okay? Can we just kind of say, okay, yeah, I get that. I'm a bit. Most of you know, I like my rock and roll. I don't like country. There is one country artist, Tim Hicks, that I kind of like. He is my guilty pleasure. And so I will listen to, but everything else, I listen to a lot of pop and rock. Tim Hicks wrote a song that describes the differences between Canada and the United States. I thought I'd quote some of the prophet Tim Hicks here this morning. You ready for it? Okay. We eat Smarties. You eat M&Ms. You think all our money looks pretend. Yeah, we got Bryan Adams, but hey, you got Bruce Springsteen. And we can drink in bars when we're just 19. Tim Hicks follows this drinking theory a little bit more. You got Brad Pitt, we got Keanu Reeves. But we got the best lake fishing, you best believe. Yeah, you make fun of us because we spell color with a U. But you think you're all that, Mr. Red, White, and Blue. We say A, you say y'all. Yeah, we both got pro football. Except we got bigger balls and a longer field and one less down. We say Z, you say Z. Sure, we watch all your TV. But you got a stronger army down there, but man, up here, we got stronger beer. There's your difference. Canada, the United States. You got Dunkin' Donuts, we got Timmy's. We got more land, but bro, you got more cities. You sure love the NFL and MLB and NBA, but to the Great White North, hockey is the only game. Some of the differences between Canada and the United States. However, those are fairly surface differences. When I was in college, I actually took a sociology course, and we spent a day actually discussing the differences between Canada and the United States, especially when it came to writing fiction. There is a difference between Canadian authors and American authors. And one of the biggest differences is that American authors tend to tie up their stories in a nice little bow. They have finality to it. They end it with a nice happily ever after comment. Canadian authors are more likely to leave the endings ambiguous. Why? Because our lives tend to be a little bit more ambiguous. Every 4 years, the United States elects a new president, and the president has power to do a lot of things. I think that we think he's more powerful than he really is, but that's my opinion. But he does have power, and he can actually change things. Every 4 or so years, we elect a new prime minister. But our prime minister isn't nearly as powerful as the president. And the truth is that the reason why we're interested in American politics is because we know that what the Americans do will affect us. We just don't get a say about it. We are, as one person put it, we are the mouse sleeping beside the elephant. And when you're a mouse sleeping beside the elephant, every burp and hiccup is a problem. Jeremiah ends Lamentations ambiguous. God, I don't know. And we get that. That is the way that we live, living beside the elephant. We understand that sometimes we can't tie everything up the way that we would like to. Our lives, to a certain extent, are governed by what other people do. And our fiction reflects that ambiguous nature. So maybe we can understand Lamentations better than any American could. Because it's not just Jeremiah's reality. To a certain extent, it is ours too. And sometimes we need something to help us. I know I have dissed this verse several times. But it's not that it doesn't have a place or that it isn't the answer that we need. It's just that we take it out of context. And so as Jeremiah closes his Lamentations with this ambiguous ending, wondering if maybe God has utterly rejected us and will never come back to us, let me remind you of what Jeremiah wrote 2 decades before Jerusalem fell. You ready? For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Whatever's going on in your life, even if you're in the middle of desolation, even if things aren't going the way that you expected them to go, know this. God has a plan. And because God has a plan, we can trust the process. We can say, God, I don't know, and I don't. But I have faith that you have a plan and that you have a process, and I will walk with you. I will trust you, even in desolation and ambiguous feelings, even when I am in distress and I'm not seeing things right. I will remind myself that you have a plan and that you are my God. And I am your child. And you have not left us. You have not forsaken us. You are still on the throne. And you are still in control of your plan. And sometimes that's all we can do. All we can do is say, hey, God, I know you got a plan. I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to wait for you and in faith trust you. And someday, maybe I'll see it, maybe I won't. Your plan will come to fulfillment. And we will be restored. For Jeremiah, he did not see the end of the plan that he trusted in. That would be for the next generation. But I am convinced that even when Jeremiah was kidnapped and taken to Egypt, he still trusted in the plan that God had set before him. And so do we. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that you are in control of the plan, that you are in control of the process, and we can trust you. I don't know how the distress ends. I don't know how the restoration will take place. But God, we know that you are on the throne and we will trust you. That God, you will lead us to the places where we need to be. And all through this, we will love you. We will praise you, giving thanks continually for the small things you are doing in our lives. May we be the people that you need as you minister on this planet. And may you help us, remind us that we can trust you. In the name of Jesus, amen.